Ladies and gentlemen, can I please bring to your attention Katherine Kovacic, who is an independent curator, director of CK Minerals Proprietary Limited, a business that specialises in sourcing rare minerals and gold for museums and private collections around the world. If you want an odd meteorite, you can do that too. In 2010, Katherine was guest curator at the Castleman Art Gallery and Historical Museum, where she curated an exhibition, Archie and Amelia Cahoon. Her article, Artists at War on the New Zealand-born Australian-British World War I artist Septimus Power, appears in the current edition of Australian War Memorial's official magazine, Wartime. Katherine is a trustee of the Copland Foundation and an alumnus of the Attingham Summer School. Please welcome Katherine to introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Richard. I'm not going to speak for very long because you're not here to hear me speak. So I'm just going to jump straight in and tell you about our first official speaker, Tom Perrigo, who has been CEO of the National Trust of Western Australia for over 15 years, where he's successfully negotiated and delivered a broad range of innovative heritage projects and programs. He's been an exceptional leader and skillful operator in a challenging and constantly changing political environment. The Trust focuses on conservation and stewardship of Western Australia's historic and natural heritage, interpreted through education and learning, and the Trust has also been leading the way with Aboriginal cultural awareness courses and workshops, with over 300 registered volunteers and heritage sites that include Wansley at Cottesloe, the Bill Sewell Complex in Geraldton, Old Farm Strawberry Hill in Albany, and Avondale at Beverley. Tom manages a large and complex portfolio, including multiple community and business partnerships and over 15 properties. The Trust in Western Australia is recognised as a national leader in some areas, and this has resulted in the development of a number of major national projects. These have included a program for educational outcomes associated with the national curriculum and a national template for reconciliation and Aboriginal interpretation. Tom is a key negotiator in the creation of the Trust's highly successful Golden Pipeline Heritage Trail. More recently, his team has developed the Burrup Stories project, sponsored by Woodside. This has assisted with the preservation of stories associated with the Burrup Peninsula's National Heritage listed area and surrounds, and the production of education and learning initiatives for the local and wider community. So, presenting Exploring New Models for Houses and Collections, Tom Perrigo.
Thank you very much. I certainly didn't write that, but it's nice to hear it. Firstly, may I acknowledge the land on which we meet is situated on Kaurna land, and the Kaurna people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land, and they continue to practice their values, language, beliefs, and customs. Secondly, may I also acknowledge all of you, and in particular the many special guests here today, and those who organize the event. They often don't get acknowledged till the end, but they certainly deserve it at the front. And my Western Australian colleague, Sarah Murphy. Unlike the previous speakers, Annabelle and Virginia, I'm certainly no expert. Sarah is. So during the course of the next 3 days, you can talk with Sarah about all the things that I as CEO shouldn't be doing. But she certainly has more expertise. Thank you, Richard, and the trustees of the Copland Foundation, as this initiative is not only welcomed and valued, it is long overdue. Unfortunately, in a country with vast distances and limited populations, the opportunity to meet and discuss the challenges of managing historic houses, gardens, and collections by people who actually do it is extremely rare. Perhaps this initiative will be the start of a more systematic and regular process for sharing our journeys and the many experiences and expertise amongst us. When I received the agenda, I immediately thought my presentation should have been placed in the session, Another View of the World, Life After a Catastrophe. Because I say that, because that more accurately reflects my journey with the National Trust in Western Australia. At the theme of the conference, The Future Approaches to Historic Houses, I wish to focus on some primary issues of change management, and during the presentation explain how these have influenced our approaches to managing both historic houses and other heritage in place in general. The primary issues that I would like to talk about is a cultural shift in traditional thinking about managing heritage places, and a strategic focus and practical outcomes, and evaluation. The first issue, a cultural shift in traditional thinking. I suggest that many of us here today, in accepting the challenges of our industry, were largely underprepared. It is not that we did not have some knowledge or experience or even in some cases expertise in the specialist industry. It is that most of us were unprepared for the need to establish an organizational culture backed by substantial and sustainable management models which make us relevant in a changing society. Let me share my journey, and as it relates to your own, and perhaps it relates to your own. As often the journey of change is as valuable as the outcome, it may at least challenge some of your traditional thinking. A lifetime ago when I started, I was excited about joining an organization which had historic houses, gardens, and collections. The very first thing I did was to take my wife and her mother to one of the Trust key properties. My experience shaped my career. I often wonder, was it the no parking or no food and drink signs everywhere? Or was it the no photographs and no children without supervision signs even before I got to the front door? Was it the no visitors beyond this point? Or was it the red ropes that almost had a skull and crossbones impact that gave me a very weird understanding that really no visitors are wanted, and certainly no visitors are welcome? I often wonder about that experience and the impact it had on me. I'm sure, to me, the signs were saying, don't come in, we don't really want you. This combined with the reality of hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual debt, the absence of governance processes and principles, and the elite club-like status of the membership, including the governing body, gave me a very instant wake-up call that words cannot really describe. There certainly are words I could use here, but it'd probably be inappropriate. There is an old Oscar Wilde saying that if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll get what you've always got. I knew change was needed, but I really had no idea where to begin. Therefore, our journey can best be summed up as a complete intellectual and psychological change to the way we do business. Put simply, after some time managing the conflicts that change come with a cultural shift, we found 4 primary principles which today underpin our organization and the way we manage historic places, gardens, and collection. These are in no priority order. Is the Trust works with and for itself, not others. For others, not itself. The change from an inward-looking club to an outward-focused community organization. A priority on partnerships, both strategic and operational. And the establishment and leadership role are all measurable objectives which underpin our strategic plan. We stopped focusing on us and our importance, and more in needs and the requirements of the community. As I say, we're just a trust, and as such we work for others. Whilst this change has been of fundamental importance in getting people more aware of the challenges we have in managing heritage places, we are literally swamped with work. My staff refer me as never say no Perrigo, and that I always face the balance of doing too much rather than doing it to the standards that we all desire. One advantage, of course, in this approach is that more people realize the many challenges we face, and hopefully owning the problem will also mean they own the solution. They certainly appreciate the work more than ever because they realize the solutions are often complex and that we are committed to helping them. In our situation in the West, we are recognized by the government and others as supporting the community. And whilst they sometimes prefer we would go away when we get involved with advocacy issues, we really have become too complex to get rid of us. The second point is the Trust is a custodian, not an owner. Whilst we have legal ownership and control over the properties, and there's 100 of them under our care, We have continuously promoted the role of custodian for both present and future generations. All of us here realize the extra burdens of responsibility that we have. We manage these places with high standards as we strive towards sustainability. These standards also ensure we have a role of leadership, in which in itself is challenging. However, it's an interesting observation, isn't it, that if people don't own the problem, they don't contribute to the solution. Therefore, getting people to understand these places belong to them is a key educational goal as they become more proactive in wanting to help. Even a few key government decision makers are becoming more aware of the challenges and are at least thinking about helping. Over the journey in Western Australia, our approach has had two key outcomes. First of all, the acceptance by a Lottery West program. In other words, like the UK, we've established a heritage lottery fund. The acceptance by Lottery West that the trust places are in fact community assets, and the establishment of this fund was crucial to our success. Whilst it took me many years to do, it now has been going on for 15 years and makes a substantial contribution to our activities. And the second key point was a significant annual state government investment for both recurrent and capital expenditure. This was probably my best achievement, and whilst it's not large, it's around $3 million a year, it has in fact enabled my organization to survive and to prosper. The third point is the trust manages with volunteers but is not managed by volunteers. I suggest all of us here can recant stories of both the joys and challenges of volunteers. From things, and these are real things in the West, like mortgaging a historic property without the trust knowing it. From gardening in a suburban property with a uniform of red underpants. The guy wanted to get a tan. To board members dressing up and taking photographs while they lay in historic beds to show volunteers what it was like in those days. These are all challenging, but volunteers we know are important. They are needed and they are valued, but the demands of excellence require organizations like us to fulfill the twin pillars of good governance. These are transparency and accountability. We proactively meet these challenges in the West, and whilst there's always more to do, our council, and indeed all our volunteers, know the difference between accountability and responsibility. All of us can delegate responsibilities to volunteers, but you cannot delegate accountability. And that is a key fundamental principle of managing with volunteers. However, in our industry, there's an urgent need to develop and provide specialist training and development. We all have a challenge to ensure more resources are invested in this area. This is why we must also recognize our most valuable asset is not volunteers to me, it's our professional staff. My team, now close to 30, and I started with 3, is one of the most highly qualified teams in the country, and as we grow, we add specialists to the layers that we need. Strong professional management is simply good business, and it ensures a quality outcome in all aspects of our industry. And that's what I like about the training that the Adelaide Trust is doing. And the fourth principle is the trust is an educational institution. Whilst our corporate vision is to conserve and interpret West Australia's heritage, historic, natural, and Aboriginal, and we're heavily involved in all of those areas, our 1964 Act to State Parliament clearly indicates that we are an educational institution. Therefore, all our programs, projects, and activities are focused on increasing knowledge, awareness, understanding, and commitment towards conserving and interpreting our heritage. These words, knowledge, awareness, understanding, and commitment, are not just words. They represent successive stages of learning, and each one is built upon the other as a stage of cognitive development. What is important to understand that people learn in different stages and environments, and we cannot just assume the level of commitment we have comes directly from knowledge. We surely cannot expect decision makers to be committed without the staged journey of learning. Therefore, we have to carefully plan our journey and provide the required opportunities to advance through these stages of cognitive development. Managing historic gardens, collections, and houses represent an ideal opportunity to develop this level of commitment, but we must all invest in time and resources to plan carefully how we use these amazing tools. I don't think we spend enough on this aspect of management, and I doubt very much if most people do. The most interesting thing about understanding who you are and why you exist allows one to focus on how to use these tools, such as historic houses, gardens, and collections, to get the level of commitment required for decision makers. Change, too, is seen as a threat rather than an opportunity for many organizations. Our journey of change took many years, and there were both professional and personal challenges. One mistake I made many, but one mistake I made was trying to knock down the entire wall of resistance rather than focusing on the cracks of commitment. Trust me, as the cracks widen, the wall comes down, but one cannot knock over the whole wall at once. I now want to talk just a little bit about strategic focus and practical outcomes. Although many of us here and throughout our industry in which we work are familiar with products and processes like Kerr's Conservation Plan or the Burr Charter by ICOMOS, they themselves do not lead to successful management. Without resources, facing a substantial backlog of capital works, public and internal perceptions and pressures, and a number of other issues, documents and standards are of little practical use. I once heard in a museum leadership course, hope is not a method. Don't we all wish it was, as many of us would be masters in it? As well, we know firsthand that rhetoric doesn't solve problems. So if there's any wonder why so many bureaucrats always tell us how to solve all our problems, don't you just love it when they say, why should we fund you when you're not sustainable? Now I just laugh at them, because quite frankly, without taxpayers' dollars, they would fade away quickly. I stress they should also never consider funding someone. It should be an investment, and this investment should be seen for what it's worth, rather than just taxpayers' dollars. It's an investment for a better place, for the future, for both present and future generations, and for a better society. Isn't it interesting how bureaucrats have no difficulty funding a road, but they have great difficulty funding a historic house? I now realize that they do not have the knowledge, the awareness, the understanding, or the commitment and to conserve and interpret Australia's heritage. And that is our challenge, to try and educate them not to get angry. In Western Australia, we soon realized that a strategic approach was needed in our role of managers of heritage places so that decision makers knew what was required. We knew that priorities were required and the model of management had to be both simple and effective. I'll come back to those. Consequently, we developed a standard model for management all types of heritage places. Our focus was to effectively and efficiently try to achieve the ideal state where the place is conserved, largely using Kerr's Conservation Plan, it's interpreted, and it's economically sustainable. Combining this with our own standards, which I previously showed up, I'll come back to that, we have in fact developed a core management model for all our places, which has measurable targets and performance indicators which we can now build on, and that's basically our simple model. We can now demonstrate to decision makers not only a strategic plan but a core model which is easy to understand even for those without knowledge. And as we undertake our journey, though, it's rare that we never have the resources to do all of these at once. But having the strategic outlook and the model has opened up many investment opportunities, including grants, sponsorships, donations, and even government investment. As we all know, it's easier to sell a shared vision than it is an idea. Again, the more people that own the vision, the more they want to help. However, as we always know, real outcomes must also be achieved. And the realization of who we are and what we've seen, the Trust initiated, develop a range of programs which reflect our mission and our 4 key objectives of partnerships, leadership, governance, and sustainability. During the part of the day-to-day journey, we have realized that presenting a heritage place as a museum is not the only, and in many cases, depending on the circumstance, may not be the best outcome as it relates to our mission and objectives. It has often been the subject of robust discussion on what is the best model to conserve and interpret the social, historic, aesthetic, scientific, and spiritual values of a place, whilst achieving our educational outcomes. Some of the major lessons learned over the years include the fact that the days the audience comes to heritage places are largely gone, except for key places. As part of the shift from inward to outward focus, the Trust realizes there is an urgent and ongoing need to reach out, to engage, and connect with the community. Some of these involve working with Aboriginal people in all that we do. We are one of the few heritage organizations that have an accredited reconciliation plan, and we're just completed standards for Aboriginal interpretation of heritage place. We actually have 6 Aboriginal foundations and a tremendous growth in managing heritage places with Aboriginal people. One of our goals in very near future, where all our properties will have dual language interpretation, and we will recognize Aboriginal values as we do European values. We have committed, finally, to archaeological programs which not only contribute to conservation and interpretation, will provide another layer for education and interpretation. Some of you may say, well, why don't they have archaeology before? But we have made a major commitment, and we're just doing a major archaeological strategic focus for all our properties. And we have now full-time archaeologists involved and partnerships with the universities. We have committed to a collection management program, but we've only started that task. A lot more needs to be done in that area. And we need a lot more resources for managing our extensive collections. But also what is very exciting, for the first time, we're finally focusing on the many gardens and landscapes which surround our places. We have a terrific full-time landscape architect. We have programs in place with partnerships with universities. And it sounds trivial to some of you, but we just employed our first full-time gardener in a regional place. Time prevents me from going in any of these details, but my colleagues and I will certainly be more than happy to share our experiences over the next few days. We have also established a solid international and national exchange program. My people can go anywhere in the world for 6 weeks and study, and we get a lot of visitors, especially from the National Trust movement around the state and around the Europe. But in the West, we depend on that exchange of ideas. We're too isolated not to have that. I would stress the real outcomes in all of these exchanges and discussions is not necessarily highlighting what worked, but what equally doesn't work. My great strength, I think, is telling people what doesn't work rather than what does work, because I've made so many mistakes in the journey. However, over the years, using our core standard model, we have initiated and developed different approaches to management heritage places, including house museums. And I thought I'd just briefly go through some of these different models. First of all, the traditional house museum. Old Farm Strawberry Hill is in Albany. It dates back to 1827 when it was a government garden supply in the military detachment in King George Sound in Albany. It's probably the earliest European farm in Western Australia. It's potentially of national significance for a number of reasons. The present house has just a 2-story portion erected in 1836, and recently we uncovered foundations 1831 in the 1840s. The Trust acquired this property in 1964, and the gardens are of great interest, and currently the Trust we're just acquiring land adjacent to the property, which has been in private ownership from descendants of the original farm. Here we have completed a master plan, conservation, business, and interpretation, and we got heavily involvement with Aboriginal people. It's a very important Aboriginal site as well. The next one is Sampson House. This is a typical house museum built in 1839. It's a large intact federation with some Queen Anne-style buildings, including a coach house, stables, cottage gardens. It's very rare in West Australia. Example of a resident built for the elite colonial merchant class. The collection is intact and probably one of the most significant collections in any historic house, certainly in Western Australia. It was gifted to the West Australian Museum a few years ago. They requested the Trust to take it because they failed. So now we have a long ways to go towards conservation, and we have to raise about $4 million, but we have already begun to transform the place through innovative educational learning programs, including proactive partnerships with the descendants, including the schools. Note the family, the Sampson family, is recognized as the oldest private family business in Australia, and they have extensive commercial connections in both the trucking and the wine industry in the West. It is a very rare property in West Australia because of its collection, and we have quite a challenge to make it sustainable, and we look forward to hearing from experts in the field how to attack such a problem. The next one is a little property in single-story vernacular homestead and local materials in the state's southwest. Most of you have heard about Margaret River. This is an area 11 kilometers outside of Margaret River. It's an excellent example of an early European home. Whilst there's no collection per se, the house and the garden combined with both European and Aboriginal stories provide the Trust an ideal opportunity to contribute to the wider understanding of the role of women, the interaction between European and Aboriginal people, and the lives of early settlers in the state's southwest. The place contains also the only known remains of an attempt at domestic production of hydroelectricity. You can see the little bit mill on the side there. And it's a beautiful property. Last year, a devastating fire destroyed 47 houses in the area, including one of the best private house museums in Australia. Michael Cheney, the Cheney family, who's head of National Bank, he had probably one of the best antique collections of wooden furniture, and also had a $200,000 wine collection. Everything's gone in fire. That's the devastation of bushfires. We were lucky. The fire, the house you can barely see in the distance. We had two local firemen who thought so much of Ellens Brook that they went directly there and they saved it by pumping water out of the little brook. Now it gives us a wonderful opportunity to enjoy the landscape and focus on the landscape. No offense to my Victorian colleagues, but most of that was Victoria tree, which is a pest in Western Australia. We were often wondering how the hell to get rid of it, and a fire came by and got rid of it. So now we're opening up the landscape and really focusing on that 1850s landscape and how that fitted into this wonderful place. The second category is house museums with the conversion of old buildings. I'll go quickly through these, but this is something we all face. How to make these places pay. Here we have an 1830s, 40s building on the shores of the Swan River. It's one of the oldest surviving buildings from the Swan River colony. It's described as English-style farmhouse. It was associated with a group of devout Wesleyan Methodists who arrived in West Australia in the ship Tranby in 1830. Some of the collection is both significant and provenance to the place. It's got several trees, oak, olive, and mulberry, believed to be planted by the original. Yet, we get some visitors. It's widely used for community events, Christmas carols, Anzac Day celebrations, a few of those things. But some schools visit, but few come to the house. And the place is deteriorating faster than we can conserve it. And if you were ever in Perth, and you wanted to visit Tranby, if you were Google it, most likely you would find Tranby Peninsula Tea Rooms, Tranby High Tea Society, Tranby Tea House. Here you have a wonderful converted late 1970s property, a warden's house transformed in an upmarket high tea facility on the property. It provides gourmet lunches and beautiful setting on the Swan River. Who would have predicted just 5 years ago that establishment of a facility would increase visitation by tenfold? Interestingly, the children's tea party at $12.50 a head is highly popular. What does this tell us about our audience? What challenges does it present? The overwhelming majority of those visitors have no real interest in visiting a historic house, or should I say paying to visit the historic house, yet they have no difficulty for paying for a high tea. It's quite an exciting challenge to face. Another property that's got a similar process is known as Woodbridge. It's an impressive two-story brick house, again on the Swan River. It's high cultural significance for a range of historic and other values. Very strong educational program. However, there are in effect few volunteers to manage it, few visitors, very little local ownership, and it's a little bit isolated. Yet, we reformed a jetty, because when I first started with the National Trust, this was a house I actually visited. And we were getting $100 and some thousand a year in revenue, and from the people coming up the Swan River in the boats. And I kept saying, wow, this is a cash cow, this is fantastic. Little did I know they were only using the toilet. They had no interest in going to the house. And when the boats stopped, we lost $100,000 a year. We went back to reality. So we've just invested money into the jetty. But again, tea room, converted coach house, unbelievably successful. And in both cases, the tea room conversions have met the recurrent costs, not maintenance, not capital, but all the other recurrent costs. They have provided us with a source of income. The third category, again, no particular industrial places. This is number one pump station. 1903, the pumping stations at number one were started, and what this basically is the journey called the Golden Pipeline. This you'll appreciate in England. We have a property called the Golden Pipeline. It runs 560 kilometers with 12 pumping stations, a number of houses, a whole facility. It goes from Mundaring to Kalgoorlie. That's our historic property. This is number one pump station. It's very popular for schools, etc., but like any heritage place, it's still got to maintain. It's got original boilers, original economizers. It's got pumping stations. It is a true industrial place, very popular with children, but how do you maintain an industrial place? So far in the last 10 years, we've spent about $15 million conserving and interpreting this, including a $1 million drive trail. There has been no economic value coming to the National Trust, but we are able to show the economic value coming to the state. Quickly, that's the inside of number one pumping station. It's an award-winning exhibition, and it's a fabulous place to visit. Couple quick ones. Industrial sawmill, 5 minutes. I'll go quickly, 5 minutes. And again, this whole heritage park outside of Perth, it's an industrial park with ruins, facilities, wood timber facility. One I did want to spend a little bit of time on, and this is Curtin Family Home. This place was the home of John Curtin, journalist, activist, Prime Minister of Australia, the first representative of West Australia. We spent over $1 million, well, in fact $1.5 million acquiring the place, fixing it up. Our recent visitor, Hillary, all the people that went with her. And I know you can't read this, and it's a shame, but what is very interesting, this is an inside cover of our magazine, what it talks about, where else in the world can you stay in a Prime Minister's residence? Because this is not a house museum. We've actually converted it to a place where you can stay 9 months of the year. You book it out, you pay, I can't remember how much, $300, $400 a week. And then 3 months a year we prepare for an exhibition. 1 month a year we have an artist in residence. So you can convert that place. All right. Adaptive use. This is an orphanage, 1902 orphanage. We just spent, lucky enough, we turned it into a cancer wellness center. Spent about $13 million. We've got 8 cancer groups in there. The place is sustainable. I've also been able to get philanthropic people to pay the rent for 10 years for those cancer groups, and I've been able to get corporate sponsors to develop business plans for those cancer groups. Very important area. 57 Murray Street is downtown Perth. A beautiful, beautiful office. This is our big project at the moment. We're converting that back to offices. Fabulous building. The Old Perth Boys School, this is the future. This is on the St. George's Terrace. It's an entrance gateway to a $1 billion redevelopment called Brookfield Place, Perth. It's empty, and we got the only entrance to the place. So we're having great fun negotiating the future of what it's going to be used for. One of the most exciting things for the future is downtown Perth. There's an old colonial hospital site. It's 9 buildings. Sorry, that's 9 buildings downtown Perth. That's just been given to the National Trust by the Premier, who has asked us to convert it's still used as the Perth Mains Hospital. It will be vacated over the next 3 years, and the Premier and the Deputy Premier have asked us to make it sustainable. He hadn't given me any money, but he knows we'll do it. Finally, our old observatory, this is where our headquarters, it's an amazing scientific cultural value. We're converting that to a function center. It will have a lot of original artifacts in it. Very quickly, the third bit, evaluation, and this is a bit, it'll only take a minute, so I do want to finish up on this section. There is a need for evaluation. And a few years ago, we took a major organizational step forward. We became proactive for the first time. We started to look ahead. And it was the fact that we were comfortable with cultural change as an organization. Don't get me wrong, we've got a huge backlog of maintenance and capital works, but we're comfortable with change. And we developed a whole bunch of models about in-house approaches to management places, and we do challenge ourselves. But I challenged myself and I challenged the organization to say, are we really making a difference? If we are, how can we deliver and prove that we're delivering long-term social, economic, and environmental benefits to the community? That, I believe, is our biggest challenge as an organization. And until we prove in the language that decision makers require, until we have a proven and tested methodology for identifying and measuring our outcomes, and convince our audience, that is the wider audience, the community and the government, that heritage is not only good business, it's good for society, we will continue to struggle. The lack in measurement of the value of historic homes, gardens, and collections will continue to hamper investment in everything that we do. We are our own worst enemies, and collectively we have failed to achieve the above in a society that claims they value their heritage. We need to rethink our roles in leadership in this area and reposition our industry so as a whole. Whilst the Australian heritage industry, there's an amazing range of talent and commitment. In my opinion, it is grossly undervalued and underutilized as a national resource. That is why at the start of the conference, I said this conference is both welcome and overdue. Management of historic houses, the gardens and collections is in desperate need of investment into more opportunities to utilize the national talent. And in closing, I want to say 2 things. First is how to implement change in any organization, but also as our industry. Think of the challenge of moving a ball up an inclined plane. If you stop, if you hesitate, or you simply chicken out, the ball falls down to the bottom again and you must start over. Time and energy can be wasted. How many times have we seen our industry and such initiatives fall due to a change of staff, a board, a council, a chicken out, a lack of motivation, a whole range of things? If you plan to achieve the same result going up the stairs without starting over each time, then when rest is needed, you can rest without going down to the bottom. This also ensures proper evaluation can take place and some planning. Each stair can be a strategic goal to get the outcome that we all want. as an industry, we collectively have the ability to go up the stairs. I congratulate again the Copland Foundation for taking us up the first step. It's up to all of us to take the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'll just say, save all your questions to the end, get them buzzing around in your head. We're going to get everybody back up here so you can bounce ideas off 4 people simultaneously.